The hardest part wasn't being alone. It was feeling like I didn't exist anymore, like I was fading out of a life I had spent more than 10 years creating. I stopped picking up calls, stopped showing up to things. My clients kept their distance. A few sent brief, polite emails. Most didn't reach out at all. And, truthfully, I preferred it that way. Silence doesn't demand explanations. It just stays with you. A week slipped by. That's when I moved into the guest room. Not because our bedroom felt haunted, but because the bed still carried the scent of her perfume. Cedarwood and amber lingered in the pillows, even after I stripped everything and washed the sheets. Then one Sunday afternoon, someone knocked on the door. I almost ignored it. But the knock, something about its rhythm stopped me. Familiar, calm, patient. It was Emily, Claire's older cousin. But really, she'd always felt more like my friend than hers. She used to help out in the yard when Claire traveled. Said pulling weeds was like therapy. She stood there holding a plain brown paper bag. I brought lemon bars, she said. No long speech. No pity in her eyes. Just a simple, figured you probably haven't been eating much. She wasn't wrong. We sat outside on the porch. At first, we didn't talk. The breeze wandered through the maple trees like it had somewhere better to be. Emily sipped her iced coffee, then eventually said, "She's a fool, you know." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. She kept going. She always had to be the sun in every room. But you made that house feel like home. That caught me off guard. Hit deeper than I expected. Because no one had ever said that to me before. Not even Claire. In the weeks that followed, Emily began to stop by more often. Never announced. Never for too long. She didn't check on me like I was broken. She just showed up, sat with me, watered the plants I kept forgetting about, left homemade soup in the fridge with sticky notes, warm on stove, not in microwave. Basil won't survive it. One night, I asked her if she blamed me. Her forehead creased. For what? For letting her go, I said. She leaned back in the chair, crossed her arms, and answered, "You didn't let her go, Michael. She let go of you. You just finally stopped running after someone who was never planning to stay." That night, I pulled out my old sketch pad, the one I hadn't opened in over a year. I flipped through the blank pages until I found a pencil sketch, a cabin beside a creek, a project I never finished. I sharpened a pencil and began filling in the shadows. Lines, forms, a roofline. It felt odd, not good or bad, just like breathing again. 3 days later, I emailed a former client, told her I was accepting design work again. She replied within the hour, "We've been waiting for you to come back." And that was a beginning, not of a new house, not of a repaired marriage, of rebuilding myself. I wasn't whole. Not yet. I still woke some nights, instinctively reaching for someone who wasn't beside me. Still heard her words echo. "You're not going anywhere in life." But now, I had started to question her direction instead of mine. Emily helped in ways she'll probably never know. She was never overly sweet, never too careful. She'd say things like, "You need new curtains." "Oh, your porch light's flickering again." Which, in her language, meant, "I see you, I care, but I'm not here to save you." One evening, as we sat quietly watching the rain trail down the edges of the roof, she turned toward me and said, "You know, there's something stronger than being angry." I glanced at her, one eyebrow raised. "Yeah? What's that supposed to be?" She gave a small, knowing smile. "Peace. Because when you finally have peace, no one can reach you, not really." That line stayed with me long after she'd gone, long after the sky cleared. It echoed in the silence, and for the first time since Claire had walked out the door, something inside me shifted. It wasn't a revelation, not some cathartic outburst. It was quieter than that, a decision forming deep in the background, one you don't announce. You just start living it. That first night, I didn't sleep, not because I was crying, not even because I missed her, but because the stillness in the house had become deafening. Have you ever sat in your own home and felt like you didn't belong there anymore? That was me, perched on the edge of a bed we once picked out together, in a room that still held her scent. Nothing about it was empty, but it all felt left behind. as if she'd used up what she needed and moved on. I told no one, not my brother, not the people at work. There's a peculiar shame that clings to you when you're the one left behind, not for being cruel or unreliable, but for being too solid, too safe. As far as I knew, she hadn't been unfaithful, but her departure still cut like betrayal, because by the time she packed her bags, she'd already been emotionally gone for a long time. And in that void, my mind filled in the blanks. That Friday, I drove past a downtown coffee shop she used to frequent, the same place where freelancing slowly became code for drifting without direction. Through the glass, I saw her, Claire, sitting by the window, laughing with a man I didn't recognize. He wore his hair in a bun, full-sleeve tattoo, wrapped in some artsy scarf despite the 78-degree heat. She leaned in close. Her hand brushed his wrist, and it wasn't accidental. I didn't get out of the car, didn't call her, didn't take a picture or vent to a friend. I just sat there, watching the way she smiled, the way she touched him like she'd done it before. And suddenly, I understood something harsh and cold. She hadn't left me on that Thursday morning. She'd left long before, when she was still sleeping beside me, but her gaze had already drifted elsewhere. I ended up at the lake, sitting on a weathered bench where I used to sketch design for lakeside cabins just for the joy of it. Now, I just stared out across the water, wrestling with questions that wouldn't answer themselves. Was I too dull? Too routine? Did I not belong in her world of spontaneous chaos and vibrant noise? The next day, an email from Claire hit my inbox. Subject line, house stuff, no hello, no hope you're doing all right. Just a cold list. I'll come get my paints and tablet on Tuesday. Please don't be home. I'll contact the internet provider to transfer the account. Don't move my books. I know exactly how I left them. 12 years, and it came down to bullet points. Like I wasn't her husband, just a guy renting out the place she used to live. I stared at that email for what felt like hours, opening it, closing it, reopening it, reading the words over and over, hoping to find even a hint of emotion buried between the lines. There was nothing, no warmth, no hesitation, just business, efficient, cold, like a checklist written by someone severing a lease, not ending a marriage. That Tuesday, I made sure not to be there. But later that night, I watched the security footage out of a kind of masochistic curiosity. She moved through the house like it was unfamiliar territory, like the furniture had shifted or the walls had closed in. She didn't pause, didn't take one last look around, except once. In the hallway, she stopped and stared at the guest room door. That used to be her favorite corner, the space where she'd read for hours, curled up under a blanket. Before she stopped reading, she reached out, brushed the frame with her fingertips, then walked away. It was the only moment that felt remotely human. 2 days later, she texted me, "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. An hour passed. Then another message came. "I'm not doing well. Please." And for a second, just a flicker, something stirred in me. Not forgiveness, not regret, just a faint echo of the version of me who would have dropped everything to hold her hand. But that man had long since vanished, and I had no reason to resurrect him so she could feel better. So I turned off my phone. And that night, for the first time in what felt like forever, I actually slept. Not peacefully, but deeply, like a man who had finally stopped dissecting his own worth. You're not going anywhere in life, and I can't keep standing still next to you. That's what she told me. No tears, no yelling, just those words, delivered like something she needed to get off her chest before brunch. And I remember standing there, coffee in one hand, rolled up blueprints in the other, like either could shield me from the fallout. My name's Michael Trent. I draw houses for a living. Quiet ones, the kind tucked away in the woods where the air doesn't rush and the silence isn't empty. I'm 38. No kids, no criminal record, no midlife crisis sports car. Just a man who thought building a life with someone meant they'd want to see it through. I met Claire in college, architecture school in Portland. She was in graphic design, unapologetically creative, the kind of person who'd light up a room without trying. I was the guy who offered her a flashlight during a blackout. I carried spare batteries in my bag, just in case. She found that funny. I found her impossible to ignore. We were opposites in every sense. And maybe that's what drew us in. They say contrast creates balance until one side gets tired of tipping. We married 5 years after graduation. Moved back to Ashland, Oregon, my hometown. She said she loved the trees. Said small towns were wholesome. I believed her. Every word. We bought a rundown Craftsman. Good structure, bad plumbing. I spent months fixing it up, new wiring, new floors. She picked out paint colors. Seafoam green and mustard yellow. She called it clashing on purpose. I built her an art studio in the attic, even added skylights. She never used it. 6 years in, she started attending creative retreats. First weekends, then whole weeks, then longer. I didn't ask too many questions. Artists need space, I told myself. I wanted to be supportive. She came back from one trip with a tattoo, a flock of birds across her collarbone. I remember touching it and her pulling away. She said it was tender. But in hindsight, I think that recoil said more than the tattoo ever did. One Thursday morning, she made pancakes. Claire never made breakfast. She poured syrup like someone preparing for a finale, then sat down, elbows on the table, eyes steady. I need to say something, she told me. For a split second, I thought she was going to tell me she was pregnant. I smiled. I waited. And then she said it. You don't want enough. You're too at ease with comfort. I feel like I'm shrinking next to you. Each sentence struck like a lit match on dry tinder. Small sparks at first, then the slow, inevitable burn. I didn't interrupt. I watched her eyes instead. They weren't angry, not even sad. They were clear, focused. And there's something merciless about clarity when someone decides they are done with you. I gave a single nod. Because what can you really say when the person you built everything with tells you they are already gone? She kissed my cheek, picked up her bag, and left the house like she was headed to pick up groceries. It was 7:46 a.m. I know that because the grandfather clock struck just as she closed the door behind her, and I swear the sound rang out like a gunshot. What followed wasn't dramatic. A quiet message from a developer in Bend, then another from a former client. Word started spreading that I was taking commissions again. No big return. No social media posts. I just started saying yes. One design led to another, then a remodel, then a request for a vacation home near Crater Lake. People said they liked my eye for serenity. Which was ironic, really, because the very calm that Claire claimed held her back was now the thing people were paying me for. One morning, I stopped by a coffee shop downtown. Not the old one we used to go to. A newer place. Fresh paint. Quiet music. As I stepped inside, the barista smiled. "Hey," she said. "Are you the architect who did that lakeside cabin?" I blinked. "Yeah, that's me." She grinned. "My parents can't stop talking about it. They told me it was the only place where they could finally breathe. That word again. Breathe. I left the cafe holding a cappuccino and a strange heaviness in my chest, as if gravity had finally remembered where I lived. Then it happened. 3 months after she walked out, Claire reappeared. It was during the annual arts fundraiser. Emily had convinced me to go. "Just show up," she'd said. "You belong in that room again." So I pulled out the only blazer I owned that didn't have sawdust on the sleeves, the one Claire once called forgettable. Emily wore navy. Understated, self-assured. We weren't together, not in the way people might assume, but she stood next to me with quiet certainty. Not to protect, not to posture. Just there. Claire arrived 20 minutes later. I sensed her before I saw her. The air changed. A tension slid into the room like humidity before a storm. Then came the sound. Heels tapping, laughter too deliberate, the familiar scent of cedar and amber. She wore red. Bold, tight. Eyes swept across the room until they landed on mine. She stopped, just briefly, then smiled, not warm, but precise. She walked over. Emily stepped aside, not retreating, just allowing the moment to unfold like someone letting a wave crash without trying to stop it. "Michael," Claire said, like she still had the right. "You look good." I nodded. "Thanks." She hesitated, waiting for me to ask how she was. I didn't. "So," she continued, "I hear you've been keeping busy." I took a sip of my drink. Working. Another pause. It's kind of remarkable, really, she said, head tilting. How quickly you bounce back. Her word wanted to sound admiring, but her tone had a sour edge, like praise dragged through resentment. And then, the inevitable pivot. I've been thinking maybe we gave up too soon. I blinked. Once. Let the words hang unanswered. She moved closer, voice softening. I've been doing some work. Therapy. Trying to understand how I mess things up. How I push people away. I stood still. No nod. No response. Just quiet. Sometimes silence is the only shovel someone needs to bury their own illusion. I'm not saying we should just go back to how things were, she added quickly. Maybe we could talk. Grab coffee. I let the pause stretch long enough for her to feel the distance. Then I said, you know what's funny? She tilted her head slightly. I stopped drinking coffee. Her smile faltered. Just a crack, but enough to show she felt it. I didn't walk past her. I walked around her, like you do when a tree no longer blocks your path to the sun. Emily rejoined me without question, steady as ever. Everything all right. Yeah, I said, and I meant it. That night, I found a message from Claire on my phone. Short, bare, unmistakably raw. I made a mistake. I didn't answer. Didn't delete it either. Just let it sit there, untouched. Because that message wasn't meant for me. It was meant for a version of me she thought still existed. The man who would have rushed in to rescue her. But he didn't live here anymore. A week went by. Then another. No more texts. The silence that used to haunt me, now it felt like clarity. I didn't want revenge. Didn't need it. The truth? She was already living inside the aftermath of her own decisions. There was nothing left for me to prove. I just had to keep going. The fundraiser had made waves. People noticed, not because I demanded it, but because I walked in whole. Not fractured, not vengeful, just settled. One morning, a small box arrived at my door. No return label. Inside was a framed photo. Claire must have taken it years ago, one of our first winters. I was outside in the snow, building a fire pit, grinning like a man with nothing to lose. There was no note, no explanation, but I didn't need one. The message was clear. She missed him, the man who bent to lift her higher, who gave everything to keep her warm. But that man, he no longer lived here. I kept the photo, didn't frame it, didn't display it, just slid it into the back of a drawer, tucked between spare batteries and a worn-out tape measure. Some pieces of the past aren't meant to be deleted, just filed away. The next morning, Emily showed up with 2 cups. Despite me swearing off coffee, she handed me a decaf. Figured you missed the habit, not the caffeine, she said with that knowing grin. She wasn't wrong. We sat on the porch, same warped board I once considered tearing up. Now, the groans beneath our feet fell toned, like the soft creak of old friendships and aging joints. She brushed a leaf off her knee and glanced over. So, what's next? I smiled. I think I want to build again. Her brow arched. Another house. Not quite, I said, handing her my new sketchbook. Not the old one filled with faded ideas and compromises. This one was clean, intentional, a simple cabin. 1 room, 2 chairs, a front porch facing the pines. No Wi-Fi. No distractions, just enough. She turned the pages slowly. No rush, no commentary. Finally, she asked, "You going to live in it?" "Not all the time," I replied, just enough to hear myself again when the world gets too loud. That evening, we stood together in the backyard. The trees were tipped in gold, the light stretching everything into honesty. She leaned into me, not as a claim or an ask, just presence. And I let her, not because I needed her to fix me, but because she never once asked me to disappear. Later that night, I pulled out a note card, wrote 1 sentence in steady ink. "You were wrong. I was never the one holding you back." I folded it once, slipped it into the back of that old photo frame Claire had sent. Didn't send it, didn't speak it, just let it sit, quiet, private, exactly where it belonged. Months passed. I built the cabin with my own hands. No plans, No schedules, just instinct and weathered wood. Every nail, every board, every hour outside helped seal a crack that no apology ever could. When it was done, I placed 2 chairs on the porch. One for me, and one for whoever stayed long enough to share the stillness. Emily visited that weekend. She brought a bottle of red, the good kind. We drank in silence as the sun tucked itself behind the ridge. Then she said, "You know what I love most about this place?" "What?" "No mirrors." She was right. I didn't need a reflection to recognize myself anymore. It was in how I stood, anchored, in how I didn't brace for the next blow, in how I no longer waited to be picked. Claire once told me I wasn't going anywhere. She was wrong. I just wasn't heading where she hoped I'd go. Because where I landed, this quiet, honest, unshakable place, was somewhere she couldn't follow. Not because I shut the door, but because peace doesn't leave a map for chaos to chase. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't anger. It's a man who rebuilds his world without ever needing to raise his voice.